Hopefully everybody can see that. Should be sharing now. So briefly, I'm just going to run through the coach's license for the new season. I'm going to run through a couple of CPD opportunities and how we can accumulate points. We're going to run through very briefly on some anti-doping. As most of you would know, we covered this at the conference, but now we're going to be sending you out like a pack afterwards, so you can just catch up on any of the updates in terms of anti-doping. So in terms of the coach's license, we're looking at doing renewals from Monday, the 17th of August coming. We're doing it a little bit earlier this year just because we've got a lot of people coming back coaching already, and we want to make sure everyone's up to speed on their various things that they need to have covered. In terms of the requirements for your license, you'll be looking at sending me in an application form, or I can use the one from the previous year. You just need to let me know that you're happy to use the one from the previous year. If you don't want to be included on the website anymore for whatever reason, in terms of your name and your contact details, you can just let me know by email, and I'm happy to update that. Obviously, you need to pay your fee, which is €50 for your license. You need to have a minimum of a level 1 qualification to be on the coach's license. So that can be the old Badminton Ireland level 1 or the new BWF level 1. So either of those qualifications upwards. Garda vetting, you'll have to have completed information of how to complete your Garda vetting on our website, which needs to be renewed every 3 years. So forms and applications can be sent to gardavetting@badmintonireland.com. And with your various ID and proof of address. In terms of safeguarding, you need a minimum of level 1 safeguarding for the license. At the moment we're accepting online safeguarding. We coming down the line, I know that Conor Fadgen, one of our staff, is preparing some online safeguarding training that members will be able to take part in. So that'll be a very useful tool for anyone who's working from home, or if we can't get access to face-to-face courses. So that's going to be something very useful coming up. And of course, you need to be affiliated to be on the license. So that's another point there. In terms of the benefits of the license, you've got your personal coaching insurance. You've got access to CPD sessions like the Coaches Conference, which we run every year. Unfortunately, we didn't have the chance to run that this year, but we run that every year, and you get a discount for that if you're on the license. So you get half price. You get updates to the latest qualifications for free. So if you're on your old Badminton Ireland courses, if you're on a Badminton Ireland, the old courses which we used to run pre-2013 was Introduction to Coaching, Badminton Ireland level 1, level 2, and level 3. So being on the license, we offer a free update to the newest BWF qualifications. So I would encourage people to take advantage of that, get up to speed with the newest qualification that you can get. You can also get inclusion on the coaching directory on our website, and any coaching queries that come into us, we always direct people to that. So they're coming in weekly. We get weekly queries on where to get and find coaches. And then we've also got inclusion in the coach mentoring program, which is something that we're just starting out with, but we're going to be looking at heavily pushing this now next year. So we're going to be inviting people to shadow in some of the academies around Ireland. So we've got academies in Clare, Nina, Dublin, Kildare, so various places. We've got our academies, which we'll be inviting coaches into. We'll be inviting coaches to our national squad sessions, should they wish to attend. And some various other coach mentoring stuff we're going to have coming up in the future. We'll have some of our, already we have a few coaches on the license who are willing to assist us with this, which is great to see. But if you're interested in getting more information on that, you can contact me. Okay, just moving on quickly. Some anti-doping. We usually cover this at the conference. After this presentation this evening, before the end of the week, I'm going to email out everybody just a quick update, a PDF update of all the slides Sport Ireland have sent us on the most up-to-date anti-doping. In terms of checking medication, we've given you detail on this before, but if you're looking to check medication for players or for any reason, you can, for Republic of Ireland, you can use that website there, which is the efarm.com. And for Northern Ireland, and I think America, Canada, and Australia, you're looking at using Global Draw to check medication, because the medication slightly differs outside the Republic of Ireland. So that's the website you'd be looking at for Northern Ireland and outside Ireland. There's also additional resources available on Sport Ireland's website in terms of anti-doping. And if you need to contact Sport Ireland for any reason, if you're looking for therapeutic exemption forms or anything like that, you'll be able to contact them. I will be including all that information on the PDF, which I'll email out to everyone by the end of the week. Okay. Okay, just lastly then, we're just going to cover off some CPD points. This is just a rough breakdown at the moment of how you can earn CPD points. We're looking at coaches on the license hitting 30 points a year. So we keep record of this as coaches send it in to us. So if they've completed, for example, 5 weeks of coaching in their club, you would get your club secretary or chairman to sign that, and you'd send that in to me, and I'll record that then under your name as having achieved 10 points there. We're also going to be adding some additional points into this list. For example, attending this webinar this evening, you will be earning points for that. So that will also go into this allocation, as well as all future CPD sessions. We're going to talk a little bit towards the end of the presentation this evening about some additional webinars we're planning to host in the future where you'll be able to earn CPD points, especially if we're continuing not to be able to do face-to-face courses. Also, you can register interest with me in those CPD sessions in advance. If we are able to do face-to-face courses for the new season, we're going to be looking at running replacement CPD sessions around the country to replace the coaches conference, which we weren't able to run this year. So we're going to be looking at holding between 2 and 3 in the various provinces around Ireland. And we'll come down and we will do a day. We're going to look at doing a day session potentially, like a short workshop. We've done this in the past and it's worked out really well. So we're going to look at doing that with some assistance from some of our coaches in the local areas. And that will also earn you CPD points. So that's just a list of that. I'm going to finish up there and pass it back to Carla.
Thanks, William, for that update there, Craig. So if anybody does have any questions that they wish to ask Craig on any of those topics, you can pop them into the Q&A box now and he will come to them at the end of Andy's presentation. So I'll now pass on to Andy, who is going to do a quick presentation on Shadow Badminton.
Okay, thank you very much. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Carla, can you see mine?
Yeah, that's perfect, Andy.
Okay, so first off, thanks very much to Badminton Ireland for inviting me back. I wish it was the conference. There's lots of people online who I know and I always have a good crack with when we see them. If you hear any banging in the background, we've got thunderstorms coming over Wrexham in North Wales where I live, and the cat's extremely scared. So who knows what might surprise us while we get into this. Okay, so we're going to have a look at Shadow Badminton. Craig asked me to do a presentation on something that we've all been doing. And it struck me that when we picked the topic of Shadow Badminton, I'd never really thought too much about exactly what we do and how we do it. So today we're going to have a look at a quick snapshot of everything that I've been thinking about through Shadow footwork training and from quite a few of the coaches who I've contacted over the last couple of weeks. So some good friends of mine who've contributed to this and to some other things I'll show you in a minute. Okay. So what you'll find through the presentation is there are lots of blue boxes. The blue boxes will hopefully prompt some thoughts for you. The thoughts, I might talk about some of them. There's a fair bit of information in here. And we're going to have a look at what makes a good footwork session. To me, it's clearly not about who can move the fastest. And I just want to get that out of the way to begin with. Also, there's going to be a few things where we'll look at pitfalls and disadvantages. Again, don't apologize for this. You can see there's a logo at the bottom, badmintonandy.com. It's my baby. I don't make any money from it. And I do hope that you guys will pop there to get a little bit more reading. When you get the presentation of Carla, you'll see that there are 2 links here and here. please jump along to the website. There's a lot more information. One of them is a shorter post for players and the other one's for coaches. Okay, so let's get right into the meat of it. Since we've been in lockdown, and I've been looking at Instagram, Facebook, everyone seems to be doing shadow badminton, partly because obviously you can't get on court. We've had shadow badminton in fields, in back gardens. Some people have got back gardens big enough to put whole badminton courts in. I've seen shadow badminton on tennis courts where two guys nearly slipped over, all sorts of comical things. And I thought what we'd probably do is let's see if we know all the different types of shadow badminton, when we've used it, and then items 3 and 4 on that bullet list are probably the two big things I want you to take away from today. So while we get there, have a guess about what you think might come up under imagination, and especially what you think EP might stand for. We'll then have a little bit of a look at some of the dangers of shadow badminton, and then some top tips to finish off, and then hopefully some great questions from you guys. Okay, these were the components that when I spoke to people about, well, what did they think about when they were designing shadow badminton? And it struck me once I wrote them all down, how many things you can actually think about when you're designing a practice. The number one was how many different types are there? We're going to have a look at that. And then, of course, you've got all the things to do with the patterns you move, the places you move, how you moved, the intensity, the speed. And then at the bottom, what you should be thinking. I know when I was a coach, going through coach awards, and still do now, hardly anyone spoke about what you should be thinking about while you're doing shadow badminton. It was more about the type of routines that you set, the movements you're doing, and the technical, not what the players should be thinking. So that's both for coaches, what should they be thinking when they're designing, but more so really for players, what do you want your players to be thinking? In the blue box, there's obviously a question there you might want to try and answer now. Interested to know whether or not your sessions are 5 to 60 seconds, or as a classic coach when I was growing up, we used to do 2-minute shadow badminton. Yeah, you can imagine what our technique was like and our motivation was like after 2 minutes, or maybe 1 minute, 10 seconds in my viewpoint. Okay, the different types of shadow badminton. Hopefully most of you will have seen these before. I think they're pretty obvious. The number one's about prescribed patterns, so everyone knows where they're moving, how many times they're moving. It can be between 2 and 6. As you see there, I'd recommend that if you do more than 6, the players are likely to forget what to do. You can then move on to a partner or coach directed. That's a great one, as long as you've got a feeder or a director who actually knows what a rally looks like and they're engaged as much as you are. So just be aware if you're doing coach or partner directed that you give them plenty of information. Then got as you decide. The key point about as you decide is remember that if the players decide, they've got to have a really good badminton brain, both to know what a rally looks like, or whether or not they're doing an attacking shadow or a defensive shadow. Do they have time? Are they practicing against Craig McCourtney or Lee Chong Wei? You know, will that make a difference to how they move? I'm sure Craig's furiously typing away in the chat box right now. Then you've got shadow and hit. That was a new one. I didn't see that until about 5 or 6 years ago, where coaches were asking players to shadow a movement and then they would deliver, as in a single shot or a multi, something to be hit by the player. Then finally, certainly in lockdown, people have been doing an awful lot of pick up and place or put down. So shuttles laid around the court, around the garden, pick them up, move them somewhere else and put them down. A really good coaching friend of mine, full-time coach, warned me that if you were to do that, I really should stress the point that hamstrings and glutes and lower backs really suffer a lot when you're doing a lot of pick up and put down. certainly to the extent that he would not recommend that as a pick up and put down. Okay, good time to use shadow practice. Certainly with beginners, player confidence, get them used to moving. And number one reason to use shadow badminton, I think, for me. It's up there with some others, but if you want to build player confidence, use shadow badminton on a few points. If you want to create rapid confidence and improvements in movements, use shadow practice again. Certainly, number 3 was another one. Another friend of mine prompted me. He said that just before they started work, after they'd finished the warm-up, he would engage the players in some form of shadow work, certainly if they wanted to do something with speed later on. And then finally, number 4, possibly what everyone knows, which is to reduce complex movements into smaller components. That does come with a bit of a problem, though, and we might talk about that later. Have a think how important it is to have a racket in the player's hand. Okay, using your imagination. To me, this is the most important factor above all else. Anyone can design a shadow practice, but are the players imagining what's going on? What are they thinking about? Not just how they move, but what the stage of the rally is. You can do so much if you visualize the rally. So if you're coaching juniors and beginners, talk to them after they've done the shadow practice about, well, what were they thinking? Did they win the rally? Was it a tough rally? You know, who were they practicing against? And I know I joked before about Craig or Lee Chong Wei, but you know that really is a serious point. Get them to imagine who's their favorite player, make them a student of the game, and get them to imagine playing a defensive rally against Victor Axelsen. So have a think about where their racket would be if they were getting ready to play against Victor. And then finally, you can see in the red, I have seen lots of shadow practices that don't look like rallies. People hitting forehand blocks into backhand blocks. Well, if they're blocking to the net, I'd love to know how in a real rally the shuttle ended up on their other side playing a block. Of course, if they're playing a block that's lifted to the back, yeah, it would make sense. But to hit a block and then go in for a net kill, you have to wonder how that would happen. Okay, EP. I hope that you'd all guess that EP was early preparation. This is right up there with imagination for me. It's really important that people prepare their rackets as if to play something. Recently, looking at a few Instagram videos with Craig, looking at players doing shadow badminton and trying to guess what strokes they were actually trying to shadow or copy or prepare for or imagine. And it was really difficult. I couldn't work out until the very last second that it was going to be a net shot, but then their heads were down. You couldn't really see what they were playing. So really push early preparation. The advantage of that is not only will it make the practice more intense for the players, make it more game-like for them, it'll actually give you a shortcut for beginners in teaching technique. Because part of the technique that they're doing, well, EP, early preparation, is the starting of the stroke cycle. If you've done your BWF awards, or even if you just know what badminton's all about, get your racket ready for the shot that you're going to play. But please, coaches, push EP and use that as a term so you can shout down the hall, you know, it's EP everyone, let's get our racket ready for what we're doing. Okay, a little bit about the dangers of shadow badminton. I don't know if dangers is a strong word or not. I actually changed the title a couple of times and wanted to say, you know, you've got to be careful you're not wasting your time, or even that the shadow badminton is actually hurting you. Remember that the goal of shadow badminton is not to become great at doing footwork. It's to get used to the movements that you're doing and understand that there are lots of different types of movements. So once you've learned to lunge and learned to chassis, well, then maybe you'll lunge longer, chassis wider, chassis and jump lunge. There are lots of different ways of moving. So please don't practice the same shadow movement over and over again, seeking perfection in that one movement. It is important to get it right, but it's not the be all and end all. And as I put there are no medals for being great at shadow badminton. So it's not like Strictly Come Dancing where there's a subjective viewpoint. You don't get an extra point for looking great. You get extra points for winning rallies. And that brings us on to the second point, where unless people are hitting shuttles and doing something about what's on the other side, or taking account of what's on the other side of the net, there are zero tactical gains. There's certainly loads of technical things you can learn from shadow footwork sessions. But tactically, if you view tactics as doing a reaction to what's going on the other side, there are no tactical advantages from shadow. Number 3, I'm not sure whether or not I should have put that in. If that ruffles a few feathers, no excuses really. There are no exact patterns on court. There are certainly no 3-step secret patterns as you move around the court. So vary your shadow constantly, but keep it game-like. As a danger, just watch out that you don't ask players to move as fast as they can, and then everything breaks down. Certainly you can try a little bit if you want of speed, but I would much prefer you to generate the speed through some sort of shuttle practice that you're doing. Point 5 about the boring, that came from a player who I used to coach, and I asked her, what do you think about shadow badminton? And she said, oh, a couple of years ago, it was so boring for me. And I said, well, how do you mean? She said, well, we just moved around the court until the coach said stop. And I said, well, surely you imagined the rally. Nope, I just followed the pattern, if I could remember it, that the coach did. I said, well, what did the coach say? And they said, well, they kept shouting at us to move faster and remember the footwork pattern. She said, but quite frankly, I just lost all motivation and I wanted to get into the hitting practices and just get through this 20-minute shadow of a 1-hour session. When I asked her what it was like now, she said, well, her view had changed. Now she understood more about what she was doing. It wasn't as boring. She said, I now know what I'm doing. I know the reasons why I'm moving as I am, and I can get on with the session. I still prefer to hit shuttles, but I now know what I'm doing. So that links us into, it is easy for players to forget the intent of the practice. So be aware of that. The boring, players don't try to lose motivation, but maybe your practices are doing that. Finally, be aware that it is so easy to overload players. We joked with Carla in the preparation for this over how long a rally, what was the average length of a rally between 2 ladies singles players? A bit of a leading question, really. And I had to stop her when she reached about 40 seconds, as the average length of a rally. Craig had to point out that juveniles, the amount of return of serves in the net. So average is a bit of a tough one, but be careful that you set durations and speeds in line with what actually goes on in a real game. Okay, so we've got 2 links to the articles that I've written. The one called Shadow Badminton, All You Need to Know. Well, of course, it's not all you need to know. I'm looking for lots of feedback from people. Don't get enough people out there. If you can hear me, I need some more feedback. I need you to contribute to these. But if you click on these links later, you can read more about the things that we've discussed. This presentation, not only will Cara and Craig send it out, but it's also on the website too. So if you click on that, you'll find quite quickly, I think it's on the Shadow Badminton All You Need to Know. There's a little button you can press and it's there. Okay, so that's me done. Hopefully we'll get some questions through. I'm prepared if we need to, Carla, to go back through the slides if people have questions on something in there. Appreciate that it's, I've skipped through probably 15 minutes. which Craig will be glad about, because that's most unusual for me, Craig, isn't it? To finish well before time.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Andy. No doubt that everyone found that very insightful. Yeah, we have a few questions coming in, so let me just pop them up on my screen now, and I'll get them going. So the first question in is, what are the key factors for multi-feeding as a coach?
So is that not next week's webinar, multi-feeding as a coach? Are they talking about multi-feeding, or are they talking about directional? I don't know who asked that question. Carla, do they want to type in?
If they want to type a message to me there and just be a little bit more specific, we can come back to it. Okay. Give them a second there and I can move on to the next question.
We'll stick to that one to see if, I certainly think that multi-feeding should form a webinar in the future, without a doubt, because I would like to suggest that that quick 15 minutes we did on shadow, we could probably do 4 hours on multi-feeding of all different types. So certainly looking forward to that later on. If we're talking about, have we got any more on that question, Carla?
Just multi-feeding.
Okay, yeah, I think let's stick to the ones on shadow for now, and then maybe if we've got time, we can drop back on the multi. But Craig, would you agree it might form its own webinar?
Potentially, yeah, and it will be included. We're going to mention a couple of webinars potentially we've coming up soon at the end. So I'll touch on the multi-feeding stuff towards the end and what we can do with that. But if we have time at the end here, we'll come back to that question in a bit more detail.
Perfect.
We'll just have a look at the topic Andy covered first, and then any specifics about the registrations and stuff that I talked about at the start.
Yep. Andy, for those who are working in clubs, how would you recommend that they implement these footwork practices?
Okay, so if we're working with juveniles, and let's start with beginner juveniles, I would certainly start off with one-step practices. Oh, I don't know, can you hear that? Oh my God, I've got thunder and lightning coming in. That's probably the multi-shuttle gods shouting at me, I think, from up there. Yeah, juveniles in the club. Certainly start off with one-step shadow work. Again, in one of the posts I've written, I've put 2 videos. There's a video at the bottom linked to YouTube from a guy called Peter Rasmussen, who was world champion. And he goes through showing one-shuttle shadow work, one-step shadow work, and shows how it can be built up over time. And literally he goes from doing one step pretty slowly, shows progressions, and ends up talking about how at his prime he was doing it for upwards of 15, 20 minutes in one go. So start with the one step. I'd start in the forecourt going forwards, and then I'd link practices like playing a block, forehand block, change your stance, go into the net. Certainly go on to partner directed, and make sure that everyone understands, as we said before, that if they feel that, ask them things like, who's the best partner here to point when you're doing partner directed, and then have a conversation with all your juveniles about the style of feeding, the pace of directing, those sorts of things. But yeah, forecourt going forwards and blocks into forecourt. Have you got any thoughts, Craig, over starting with juniors?
Yeah, I think what you mentioned there about the partners is really important. A lot of the times you see people aren't really interested to point, that they kind of are waving their hand and pointing in a corner, whereas it's really important you give them very clear instructions on how you want them to point. So otherwise I feel like both players are going to lose interest. The player taking part is like, he's not pointing right for me, and then the person is still continuing not to do really what you're looking for them to do. So just try and be really clear with juniors on exactly what you want them to do before you send them out to do it, I think, with the footwork. And in small sections as well, try not to give them too much to do at once. Andy mentioned in his presentation, you can split it into small sections and keep it specific to the technique you're working on in your session. So if you're working on some net shots during your session, maybe you might start off with just some movement in the net. Leave the back corners out of it. I don't know what you think about that, Andy, but that's how
I agree completely.
Perfect. Thanks, Mel, guys. I have a question in here from Michael O'Meara, which is the predictable versus the unpredictable patterns and the timing of the split step.
Yeah.
You can see I'm pausing because Mike's asked the question, so I know I've got to give a good answer here. And it's so the answer will be yes, Mike. And yeah, now I'll say a little bit more. So it is really important at times that you allow a time for a split step to take place. Sorry, it's just, I'll just shut this door. The rain has just started to pour now.
Disappeared like a puff of smoke.
Sorry about that. Okay, yeah. Two types of shadow directions though. There will be times when you're shadowing, so say someone goes to the forecourt and hits a lift. Therefore, they'll have to get ready for a defensive block afterwards or get ready to be defensive. So they themselves have to allow time to come back, split, and then move somewhere else. So again, encourage the players, if they're doing the one where they decide where to move, say to them, well, did you allow, how high was your lift? If it's up to the roof, there's plenty of time to come back, split, and then move again. Whereas some of the time, if they move to the back of the court and they hit a straight smash and it's gone over the net and they run to the middle and then they split or do some sort of change of stance and then they run to the net, you could ask the players, well, how good was the smash in your imagination that you hit? You know, if it's a really wide smash down that girl's backhand and she's struggling to get it, why didn't you just run straight into the net? So again, two completely different scenarios. One where you hit a smash and you imagine that the player is pretty confident and is ready for your block. So therefore you're going to have to move somewhere else, do a small split. But again, you could imagine hitting that wonderful jump smash down the line, wide of them, and come in and hit a net kill. But please, if you come in and hit a net kill, why not just stop shadowing at that point? Put your fist in the air, Mr. Juvenile, or Mrs. Juvenile, put your fist in the air, fist pump and say you've just won the rally. Because if that's what you've imagined, that's where the rally finishes. So, number one, make sure split steps are allowed for. Discuss those with the players. Slow everyone down if you need to bring them in. But also make sure there are rallies done where you don't need to split. I mean, I hope that's given Mike some thought. Has Mike come back with any questions on top of that?
He hasn't yet. We'll see in a minute if he does, and I will let you know. Craig, there's some questions in for you in the meantime. Francis O'Connor is asking, what is 1 year coach development program equaling to 15 points on the CPP?
Yeah, so just briefly on that one, that's the tutoring course or the coach developer course that Sport Ireland offer. And they offer one a year, and generally we would send that out to people who've expressed interest for it on the license application. So anyone interested in doing tutoring would get back to us, and we send them the details for that. So in Northern Ireland, they run the Propel course, and in Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, they also run the coach developer course, which Sport Ireland run. So people can have the opportunity to become a tutor with that. So that's the allocation of the 15 points there.
Perfect. And then there's just a very similar question from Francis as well, so we'll get that ticked as well. Is the minimum 5 weeks coaching equals 15 points all that is allocated for the full year? Yeah.
So the 5 weeks coaching, you can only claim that allocation of points once. So you do your 5 weeks of coaching and you get your 15 points for that. It's very easy to make up your other points. You can attend the conference or webinars. Now we're going to be offering 10 points probably per webinar, or the conferences usually we're offering 20 points if you attend the coaches conference for the 2 days. So you You just need to do your 5 weeks of coaching in your club and your conference, and you've got your 30 points already. So very easy to achieve for most people, I think.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Andy, just another question in for yourself. How long would you typically spend on shadow footwork during a 90-minute long session?
I think Craig and I might split this answer, because Craig does a lot more squad coaching than I do, and mine's more individual, has been more individual. So I don't know if you want to go first, Craig. Squad coaching, 90-minute session.
Yeah, I do a lot of 90-minute sessions during the week. Two today, so we're busy at the moment. I tend to use the shadow footwork for warm-ups, and not necessarily. I don't always necessarily use the net. So we can be doing. We'll talk about technique program before we finish here this evening. But there's lots of good fast footwork exercises that you can take from that and use as warm up. So I would include that as footwork, because they're doing a lot of movements, split step and turn in, which they would be doing on court. So I would spend 15 minutes usually on footwork if as part of the warm up as well. So instead of your standard kind of jogging or skipping or up and down the hall, we might just do a little bit of footwork. But I'll always try and link it to the session I'm doing. So if I'm doing some net work for the session, I'm going to try and do some footwork related to that. I'm going to do lots of lunging. I'm going to do some chassing. I'm going to do split steps and turning. But I'm not necessarily going to use the court to do that. I might use just any space, because it's something that you can do. We've seen people putting up videos. You can do it in your garden. So quite a short amount of time, because they're going to be doing lots of the footwork as they hit their strokes and do their practice. So I don't think it's necessary to spend an overly long amount of time on it. I'll see what Andy thinks. I want to know what your opinion is on that.
Yeah, so I'll give two different answers to that one. Certainly when I'm doing individual or very small group, just like Craig did, do something to warm up the feet. But then as the shadow badminton that we've been talking about, where we've been saying it should resemble real rallies, I would certainly do that for, 5 minutes in the beginning, but only with the intent of what we were about to do when we were hitting. So let's say we were working on someone's around the head. We'd get them to do a little bit of shadow work around the head, but emphasizing something within that. So it might be, let's get a really good push off at the start with a good split, or the emphasis for that, or another one of the shadows might be, when you get to the back of the court, really imagine pushing off the court and spinning in the air. Now that might be something that when you start to feed shuttles to them, that they might not be very good at, because they can't get the timing. So here we're talking about a player who's in development. One of the things I want you to have a think about, if you've tried shadow badminton, have you ever noticed in your squads that people seem to master the footwork technique reasonably quickly? They can chassis up to, or they can chassis behind when they're going in for a forehand net shot. And you're looking at them and you think, yeah, these people are really improving. Everyone seems happy and enjoying it. And then you bring a shuttle in and all the footwork seems to fall apart, or it's clearly not as good as it was. So you get this roller coaster of, if someone came in and marked, as in technique, they might get a 9 out of 10 for the footwork. And then you bring a shuttle in, and in technique, it might drop to a 6 out of 10. And that's because the timing that's involved, or their sequencing of their movements, their thinking and their muscles, when there's a shuttle in an opponent, is completely different than when they're just shadowing around. So for that reason, I would do a little bit of shadow, let them hit, and then bring a little bit of shadow back in again, certainly on my small group and one-to-one coaching. Because as we said, one of the good things about shadow is the confidence aspect of it is really important. So if you want to encourage someone to get off the court, off the ground when they're doing around their heads, and they're having trouble managing that with a shuttle, it's a really good way of getting them to do it as a shadow. Now, what I'd also say now is, let's say you're dealing with some really good under 17 under 19 boys and girls. There's no problem at all for them using shadow as a fitness training. So they can do 1-step, 2-step movements around the court with the sole intent of getting some form of aerobic training. It certainly won't be the same as playing a real rally, but they can wear a heart rate monitor and they can decide how they want to move. So I don't want you to leave tonight thinking, well, shadow's only for juveniles, it's only for people who are beginners. Everyone can do it, but you really need to know why you're doing it. So I really don't mind if someone says, look, I'm going to do a shadow movement for 2 minutes, because I'll look at them and decide, well, have they got early preparation for all that time? Have they got the mental strength to imagine a rally? I don't know if a rally ever lasted 2 minutes, Craig. I'm just searching, and this is where we need Jill Clark on a webinar. Has a rally ever lasted 2 minutes? Maybe, I'm not sure. I think there was some Jano Jorgensen ones on a podcast recently where he said he hated a 104-shot rally because no one was really moving at the end. He said people were just surviving. So my recommendation is let people experiment with how they do it if they're older, decide what they're doing. And with juveniles, 90-minute session, probably max 10 minutes. As a quick aside, I was shocked how many people I asked who were full-time coaches, how much shadow work do you do? And maybe naively, I expected them to be saying, oh, a third of the session. There was nowhere near that. It was far less. Most of them said, we do something after the warm-up, and we might do it for 5 to 10 minutes. Craig, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. With the longest rally there, I've seen Mike O'Mara put in the chat, Jano Jorgensen and Tien to win in the World Championships, I think, 2013.
How many minutes though?
I think it was just over 2 minute rally. That's the longest. That's the longest ever. That's a world record. I think that rally. So,
but yeah, you guys might easily ask for 30-second shadows. And what I'd say to the coaches out there, if you're asking your players to do 30-second shadows, number one, what are you doing for 30 seconds? Are you watching them all that time? Hopefully you're not on your phones. Hopefully you're not running out for a coffee, but you've got to be watching your players, because it's hard mentally to stay focused for 30 seconds, especially if it's repetitious and you're doing 5 or 6 sets. And secondly, go and measure the length of the rallies. And here's one for you. Measure the average length of the rallies that your players play and double it. And you still won't be at 30 seconds. So if anyone wants to dispute that, I'll give them a Badminton Andy t-shirt, and you can do some stats analysis for me. And I'll give you a t-shirt if you get over 30 seconds as an average for, say, an under 13, under 12 player.
Thanks a million, Andy. There's just one question in here with a bit of housekeeping. Will there be an information pack sent after this webinar on the information shared? Yes, you'll be getting a copy of the slides that Andy presented this evening, and also the protocols that Badminton Ireland produced for coaches to return to coaching badminton. And if the video renders in time for tomorrow, I will also attach a link to the video, and if not, I'll send that in a supplemental email to you as well. There's another question in at the moment, and it is, how would you coach a juvenile player with round the head where they keep dropping their racket to the side? So I'll open that up to both of you. I'm sure you both have additions to that.
I think I'm only I was about to say Craig's got more BWF tutoring awards than I have, or he will have very soon anyway. Do you want to have a go at that one first, Craig?
Yeah, we were doing it today actually at our technique camps. We were doing round the head corner, so perfect time to answer. And it's an interesting question, because it's actually such an important thing for juveniles to get their racket and their racket shoulder around as quickly as possible, so they're not late. A lot of the time we've seen them falling into the back corner. So that's something that Andy's shadow talk there and his early preparation could be very useful for. So we're doing a little bit of shadowing before they're doing any hitting. sort of chaining, doing some chaining work to chain it up to hitting and movement together. So we might start off with just a hit. So have them all ready with the racket up and ready and get them to hit. Or we can have them just shadow first and focus on a small section of the movement, just the pivoting, where they pivot on their left foot around onto with the racket coming around on the right racket leg coming around. So that's something we could work on first, which could help them. Trying to do it all in one go with a juvenile, we've all been there. It's very difficult. So try and break it up into manageable chunks is my advice, and then chain them together as they improve. I'll let you continue on there, Andy.
So for me, one of the things that I would do before I started, let's say that was the aim of your session, and we often spoke about, well, what are you going to try and do tonight? One of the things that I would do is, there we go. Can you see that? I take that photograph in with me, or photographs like it, print them out, even, and just so you know, I do buy my photographs off Badminton Photos. So if you ever see any on Badminton Andy, I have paid for them, but maybe not this one. But send some photographs to the players before the session, because, okay, we know Carolina, no, it's not Carolina Marin here, I'm not sure who that is. But before we do it, we know that this girl's actually hitting a shuttle, but this could be shadow badminton. So create that imagination in the players' minds that this feed is a tough feed around the head. Encourage them that they're going to have to move quickly and prepare that racket quickly. So again, use the photographs, use the imagination. One that I was taught many years ago, I can't do it now because I've lost a little bit of hair, but someone once said to me, as my 6 ways of coaching the same thing in a different way, imagine brushing your hair with your hand as it goes over the top. Now that's not going to work with everyone, but it's in your toolbox. So anyone who has their racket down, you can encourage them to take their racket up over the top, show them photos like this, tell them to go away if they're into this type of thing, tell them to go away and come back with 3 other photos just like this before next week's session. And then put the iPad at the side of the court and get them to practice this way. It is more about creating a desire and a motivation. If they continue to drop their rackets, I would say that they're not motivated because you haven't given them that motivation or that desire to prepare for the shot. And then, of course, as we said before, get into using the shuttle really quickly and do some tough feeds down the side of the court. That's just as effective. I mean, I hope that helps who asked that question, by the way, Carla. Can we?
1 second, I'll check now. Well, you know, I'm not actually sure the name, Andy. It's a number with it, so.
Okay, no worries. I thought it might have been our friend Stuart Carson there, all the way from South Africa, Craig. I was waiting for Stuart to drop one in, you see.
I'm just conscious of time. I don't want us to roll too much over. Well, there's Stuart for you now, Andy. There's one player coming in, or one question coming in from Stuart, if you want to finish on that one. It says, for Andy, if you have a player that does not have a good split step or has a slow push off, are there certain shadow exercises that you do to help improve the split or push off?
Okay, I think there's one for that's a future webinar for Craig. Let's do one on split step and improving power for push off. Many different ways of practicing it. Shadow will be one of them. Doing stuff against the wall, which for those of you who know me, I'd like to sort that out. Maybe that's another web. It's a bit like a technique white one we might do, but we'd certainly talk about white to increase split step and lots of one shuttle work that's coming back over. But in the beginning, some shadow practice to encourage the players to actually put their mind into their feet for split. So I hope that answers Stuart. I'll catch up with Stuart on another time, and I'm sure I can discuss that one more with him.
Perfect. Before we go, Andy, that question about round the head was from Michelle Core, just so you know.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
Well,
so I'm gonna.
I would give her a prize for maybe the best question, but that'll be on another website.
A Badminton Andy t-shirt from yourself. That takes us to the end of this evening's webinar. So on behalf of Badminton Ireland, I'd like to thank Andy for joining us this evening. No doubt it was insightful for all of our viewers, and I definitely think they all took something home from them. With that, I will again just reiterate, I will be sending an email out with the copy of Andy's slides from this evening, the coaches' protocols, a link to the video hopefully, and the contact details for Andy and Craig. Again, I know I have posted them tonight, but in case anybody missed them, I will put them in that email as well. Thank you very much for joining. I just want to pass over to Craig just for one quick final note on technique before we finish, but thank you all for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Carla. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. It's been some really great questions there as well towards the end. So thanks for those. Just very quickly, I mentioned about future webinars earlier in the presentation and how you guys can achieve some more of your CPD points for during the season. Me and Andy have been chatting for many hours, isn't that right, Andy? About running some more CPDs for you guys. So what we're going to look at doing is 1 CPD a month potentially from the new season onwards. So we're going to be looking at running through all levels of the technique program, one webinar at a time. So we'll take one webinar just for the white technique level, and we'll really get into the nitty gritty of it, of how to coach it, when we can use it, how we can tutor it. If coaches would like to tutor some of the technique program for us, we'd be delighted for you to do that. So we can talk about some tips and tricks when you're tutoring the technique program. So we're going to be doing some of those webinars in the future, and me and Andy are pretty excited for that one. So we'll be sending that out on our website and stuff then. Also, I am going to be sending out PDFs on the anti-doping updates to everybody by the end of the week. So just keep an eye on those. And any questions on anti-doping, feel free to drop me an email and I'll make sure it gets answered for you. So again, a massive thanks for Andy for being a guest for this webinar, and a massive well done to Carla. She did a massive amount of work in organising this, and thanks for everyone for attending this evening.
Thanks very much, guys.
Cheers. Thank you.
See you guys.
Enjoy your evening.
You too.